Dear friends, I am glad to welcome everyone to the Feigen Life channel. Today is Friday, already the 12th of December. 21 hours 1 minute in Kiev, 22 hours 1 minute in Moscow, and we are holding another stream on our channel. I am glad to welcome Vitaly Portnikov today. Vitaly, glad to see you. Hello? We called the Ether World for Christmas. Well, in the most general way called. Of course, we will talk about all the latest events, the twists and turns of the peace agreements, the options for his response to Ukraine, and so on and so on and so on. It will deserve it, because for some, as it were, the illusion of the world becomes real. I don't know what it's based on. I hear some experts. For others, it is obvious that there is no normal way out of this situation in general. Therefore, it would be appropriate to discuss all of this, talk about it all. And as usual, as always, those 2,500 who have already joined us, please ask viewers to post links to this broadcast in their social media accounts, groups. Those thousands who will put marks like. So to say, thank you very much to them, but to those who have not yet delivered you, so to speak, with a reproach of the word, requests that you do the same and thus help our broadcast get into the recommended. And of course, they subscribe to the Feigen Life channel, as well as to Vitaly Portnikov's channel, where this broadcast is also being broadcast in the description of this video by the name of Vitaly Portnikov. You will find this link, watch the broadcast there, subscribe and so on. Well, then we ask Vitaly Portnikov a question. Do you really think that I am definitely saying with irony that a demilitarized zone, the remaining part of Donbass, is in principle possible at all? All this can be discussed, I don't know, based on the credibility of Moscow, which means it does not enter the army, but simply so. It's just a simple regardie. I just don't know how it can be discussed at all. Well, what are you mocking, and we are seriously discussing this. Well, what can we do? Their task is quite obvious to me. The aim is to destabilize the situation in Ukraine, so that Trump put pressure on Zelensky, and Zelensky had nowhere to retreat, and for him to proclaim a certain statement that would lead to the destabilization of the situation in Kiev, to the collapse of the state and the army. I say once again that the scene in Yerevan is constantly before my eyes. I think I've already told you about this more than once. So, when Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan appeared on television screens at the end of the Second Karabakh War and announced that he, together with the President of Azerbaijan and Russia, signed a joint statement that practically means the rejection of Armenia. The Armenian forces firm the positions they occupied in and around Nagorno-Karabakh on the sovereign territory of Azerbaijan for decades. I am not discussing the question at all now, who was right in this situation, who is to blame. Because we are well aware that it is possible to ask questions to everyone there in this conflict. But I have never had any doubts about the inviolability of the border in Europe. Azerbaijan and Armenia are referred to European countries, and between them was unbreakable internationally recognized borders. But that's not what we're discussing right now. Not that. We only discuss the fact that in this situation, the Armenian society was completely unprepared for such a development of events. And there the bacchanal began. Their deputies were beaten on the streets of the speaker. People were in a frenzy. And this is despite the fact that I would like to point out to you that the Armenian people simply historically do not have such an internal conflict of identity that is present in the Ukrainian one. Yeah. And Putin understands all this very well, because he constantly suggests moves that are fraught with absolutely dead end. And by the way, already some of his moves are beginning to be perceived as if it were real, and even by Zelensky. That's when Putin says, but they can decide it in a referendum, right? And Zelensky says, the issues of the territory are decided by the Ukrainian people's referendums. And in what kind of referendum, would I like to ask you? Actually speaking, in order to hold such a referendum, it is necessary that a certain article appears in the Ukrainian constitution in general, suggesting that it is possible to hold a referendum on changing the territory of the country, right? Well, it makes sense. This is logical, because without such an article, you will not hold a referendum. You're a lawyer, you know that as well as I do. So it is necessary that the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, after peace comes, it decides that a referendum will be held, which will then be able to resolve the issue of the territorial structure of Ukraine, right? So either the law on the referendum is necessary, yes. Change it. No, wait, but it should be a law on a constitutional referendum. The Constitution. Yes. The Constitution itself does not imply anything like that. Yes. So look, during a state of war or emergency, the Verkhovna Rada cannot change the Constitution at all. So we must first abolish martial law. Then, at 2 sessions of the Verkhovna Rada, to adopt a decision on the referendum law, as you say, to amend the Constitution. Then it is necessary for the Constitutional Court to hand over its expert opinion on this topic. Then the Verkhovna Rada will make these changes to the Constitution. Then it is necessary to hold a referendum, and then at this referendum, if citizens really speak out for changing the territorial integrity, it is necessary to implement this decision at 2 sessions and get permission from the Constitutional Court. But that's not all. The whole point is that Article 157 of the Constitution of Ukraine states that it cannot be changed in parts that relate to the territorial integrity of Ukraine. The Constitution of Ukraine establishes provisions that cannot be changed. These changes are related to the elimination of independence or violation of the territorial integrity of Ukraine. In other words, it is explicitly prohibited by the Constitution. No parliament can actually pass such a referendum in this way. In order for the Ukrainian people to have the opportunity to make such decisions, it is necessary, to my great regret, to cancel the constitution in force in the country and adopt a new one. Here's what I've been telling you. I've been telling you for several broadcasts in a row about how this is a referendum, 2 sessions in a row. But it's also been many years. And my German colleague wrote to me, "Why didn't you read the 157th article of your own constitution?" I read it and realized that he was generally right. If the Constitution prohibits such actions, how will you take them? Directly prohibits it. And these articles are not changed in this Constitution. In other words, the 157th article of the Constitution explicitly prohibits taking any actions aimed at eliminating independence or violating territorial integrity. And what to do next? As a lawyer, how would you interpret this? Well, it's clear that they want to overcome this in an arbitrary way. It's also obvious. It cannot be overcome in an arbitrary way, because even if it is overcome in an arbitrary way, any next leadership of Ukraine, yes, he will be able to return to the 157th article and remind that all these decisions were illegal. And the persons who made these decisions may be punished accordingly. By the way, the Constitution of the Russian Federation is arranged in the same way as there. That criminal punishment for such things will be introduced in Russia in general. Yes. For violation of territorial integrity there is. Yes, that's right. Calls for violation. She's a call. So I don't really know when all the talk about the referendum, or when Ukraine needs to recognize that Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia region, Crimea, is part of Russia. Well, admit it, as Zelensky admits, yes, he will speak and say it. This is prohibited by law. And Zelensky does not have the authority to change this law, and none of us has the Verkhovna Rada. And Trump can recognize the Russian status of the occupied Ukrainian territories. Only this is also prohibited by Ukrainian-American legislation. This is forbidden. He can't do that. In other words, all of this will be a statement by specific individuals that their successors can disavow, even without doing anything. Do you understand? Just as, by the way, if you look at the logic of the Russian constitution, the fact that the signature of the President of Russia is under the Almaty Declaration, any successor of Putin can disavow the entry of Crimea, Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk and Lugansk regions into Russia. I'm not even doing anything. Because this is an illegal decision, contrary to the legislation of Russia. In Russia, the next one cancels the previous one for this. There is no need for any legitimacy. Yes, that's right, it doesn't need collectivity. Well, in general, in this sense it's all a dead end, and I don't believe that Putin doesn't know this. And he knows it. That's not what interests him. He is simply using this situation of Trump himself to destabilize the situation in our country. But this means that he does not want to stop the war. That's because there is a dispute whether his intention is really, having received to the maximum what he wants now. Specifically in terms of guaranteeing the security of territorial concessions, he is ready to stop the war. My thesis is that he is not ready to stop the war. That he is not ready to stop the war, but you and I have no information about the economic state of Russia. Complete information. If we had complete information, we could speak more accurately. We must always make the assumption that everything in the Russian economy is not as good as they think. Fair enough. And then they can stop at least in order to remove some of the sanctions. But you can see now a very strange situation for them happened to reputational credit. That's what they did not expect. You see, and Western politicians, they are also not children, as they say, who will just sit back and watch their own laws prevent them from surviving. Here is what happened at the meeting of the ambassadors of the European Union countries, and what will obviously happen at the summit. This is an absolutely amazing situation. They decided to permanently freeze Russian assets by a simple majority of votes. Yeah. Spitting on Hungary, Slovakia. Yes. And having actually ignored Belgium's remark, now they can allocate money to Ukraine with the same simple majority of votes. It's absolutely amazing. But Belgium will not risk anything at the same time, because it has nothing to do with it. Well, she can't be sued because it's not her. They took that away from her, too. Here, serve on them. Let's go with you, says Barda Weber. Putin, together with her and you, we will file them in some court. Well, yes. But this is exactly what Putin did not expect. He was sure, probably, that Orban's Fico would block this story. Trump won't. One time. Yes, and Trump is the decisive one here. Trump, who, as we now know from leaks of the American press, opposed the requisition of Euroclear assets. We know. And what? And it didn't work out. Well, this is a strong-willed decision, of course. Yes, they have strong-willed, that is, they just already realized that they should act the same way as Trump and Putin. That is, I found it, it's called I found a scythe on a stone. We keep talking about it, that this is the only way. Yes, because with Trump and Putin, you can only act tough. Here all these attempts to talk with Trump, as a pupil of this younger group of the kindergarten, they lead to nothing. With Trump, we need to talk so that he felt the force. He respects only the forces. He respects nothing else. When he does not see the strength, he starts like any, so to speak, an adventurer from the real estate market, trampling on the enemy with his feet. And when he sees the force, he immediately runs away and looks at how others are trying to restore order. As you can see, he has not yet taken any serious strong-willed decision. Except for the demonstrative bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities, which is still unknown how it really ended. Yes, absolutely fair. Well, at least we understand that the Iranian regime is the most alive of all the living. Well, like Venezuelan. Yes, it's true. That's it. And this, in principle, may say that all of Putin's plans are not necessarily completely feasible. Like the current situation with Kapinski. But it's a beautiful situation. I want to talk first of all about the heroism of the Ukrainian military, who managed to surround Russian gangsters in this city. I use the word bandits absolutely clearly, because I believe that people who come to occupy territory from a foreign country and carry out illegal orders, they are not military personnel, they are a band, not an army. But this is the case. It is always difficult to discuss. And the fact that Zelensky came to Kuping, right? The same. I have been near this stela many times. It has happened more than once, and that's why, well, I know where it is, so, well, yes. There you go. The capture of which Gerasimov reported to Putin in November. And this is also a kind of change of plan, because Putin needs to demonstrate to Trump that they are advancing across the entire width of the front. You see, I am also an absolutely amazing thing, because every time the Russian army falls into the same strange trap that it builds itself, it stretches the front and cannot concentrate resources on any priority direction. Well, I remember that once it was said that General Gerasimov is an outstanding strategist. Well, where is this strategy? And he makes the same mistake every time, which is understandable to any cadet of the General Staff Academy. If you want to take the cover, you have to concentrate your forces on the cover direction. If you want to take Kupin, you must concentrate your forces on the Kupin direction. You can't act equally effectively in all directions. This is the history of any wars. Well, if you have an incalculable amount of resources, then of course you can afford it, but Russia does not have this incalculable amount, either in demographic terms or in military technical terms. If I may, Vitaly, please excuse me again for interrupting, I can explain it. It's more for the audience. You already know that. Perhaps this is being done for something completely different, because much of what the General Staff and Gerasimov are doing is being done specifically for Putin. Putin sets the task, let the Ukrainian front crack along a significant length. Let the AFU troops run, because I announced that I will take everything soon. If you don't give it yourself, we'll take it all. And Donetsk region, and in Zaporozhye, we will take 30 kilometers there, 30 kilometers there. On the road from Orekhovo to Kamyshevaye and beyond. That is, he does not need to take any particular Pokrovsk and demonstrate it. No, he has to show that Kupinsk, Pokrovsk, Zaporozhye, and here we have it. And just give up. And it's better to sign right now, withdraw the troops, because we will take everything anyway. Once we take the leadership, and so take everything, then this is not quite a purely military issue. That's the question. Yes. But the result is the same. Well, what was he like when he was different? Well, that's why it seemed to me that some conclusions from the logic of the Blitzkrieg should be made, but they are not made. And it is clear that if not Trump's pressure, then Ukraine, in this situation, Russian troops in Donetsk region, can still be restrained for a long time. Well, yes, of course. Well, yes. And we are already more than 13,000 people watching, 3,500 have put likes. And we are only on the air for 16 minutes. Just give, help, the opportunity to do such a favor. Other viewers will find out that this broadcast is on, join it, listen to our dialogue. And of course, subscribe to the Feigen Life channel, and to the channel of Vitaly Portnikov. Don't forget, there's a live broadcast going on there too. You can subscribe, watch the broadcast there. There are 2 channels and Russian-speaking, Ukrainian-speaking. But you can easily find them without any difficulties at all. So don't forget about it. Well, and the last announcement, so that you don't have time to say about it. You remember that we are especially for you, especially from Russia, those who watch us. It is watched by a significant number of people experiencing problems. I know, I look at the statistics of my channel. You can, so to speak, use our Feigen VPN tool, which allows you to overcome blockages, access to prohibited content of various kinds, and so on. To do this, follow the link, or go through the one that we gave you on the Telegram bot Feigen VPN bot, and subscribe there. Do you have Russian cards for a year? I highly recommend you to sign up for a 1-year subscription. Or through the Feigen Life website. No. There are both links, and if you have cards with access to the Visa MasterCard payment system, you can subscribe for a year. Or on the spot, as you please. And, accordingly, also via a Telegram bot, but this is more for Russian users. Don't forget that the situation is getting worse. Don't be under any illusions about messengers and social networks. The opportunities to access them will be reduced and reduced. And if you work ahead of the curve, then somehow it will be easier for you to overcome it, but in any case, stay in touch. And then we'll see if the Russian segment of the internet turns off altogether. We are also preparing all sorts of surprises. So one way or another, now the main way is to step aside, so this connection with us is Feigen. Well, or something else. You don't like it. And we continue. All right. Let's go infirm the other side. What does this mean for Trump? This haste is due to the fact that he understands the rating, already say 36%. A lot, a little, he says, it's a disaster. Someone says, well, no fig falls there, then it may increase, although I do not understand how it will increase. Well, it's none of my business. A year is coming soon, and he has elections for next year. He needs to approach them with something, because to lose the elections to the House of Representatives, just to lose the majority in the House of Representatives, it means, well, here are all the consequences that follow. Moreover, there are no encouraging signals. I'm not talking now. I treat the progressives of the Democratic parties, to be honest, like shit. This is my personal opinion about Mamdana, this woman who became the mayor of Seattle unemployed there, and others like that. This is my personal opinion. I do not impose it on anyone. Someone likes them. Please, I'm not imposing at all. But even they are winning, and the Republicans are winning. And this is the prospect that Republican candidates supported by Trump will lose in the districts to the House of Representatives. In other words, the situation is threatening for him. He needs as many political dividends as possible to sell to society the fulfillment of his obligations, promises, and so on. In order not to lose these elections, at least to leave the situation 50-50. Can we assume that this is Trump's frenzied activity, a statement about ultimatums, but let's do everything by Christmas, let's do this. Let's do that. This haste is caused by his personal need. Some just say that he wants to accept money as soon as possible, issues related to investments there, something else. What's more here? But I don't really understand how Trump's rating will be affected by his desire to practically sell Ukraine to Russia. Is this, by the way, a quote from Trump, that Vitkov should have just sold Ukraine to Russia? Well, that's a good question. Secondly, I am not sure that, in principle, the Russian-Ukrainian war seriously affects the distribution of forces in the chamber. Have you already talked about this? Yes. Of course, Americans support Ukraine, but this is not the first question of voting. And I don't think that this activity is in any way. 70% shows, Vitaly. Sure, Mark, but that's 70% on a secondary policy issue. Well, people. Swings on the eyebrows. You need a small weight, but a small one. Are you sure that this situation, that a small weight will help? Not sure. I'm talking to you here. I'm not sure. I think he needed to think about his economic policy, but this is something he is not able to think about. Because he has an idea of economic policy as some kind of native of the Midwest of the 19th century. He believes in tariffs, he believes in pressure, he believes in economic wars, he believes that he can blackmail and intimidate. It has nothing to do with the economy at all. You know, there is no mind to build houses, sorry, of course. It always comes to mind when you see people like Trump. There you go. Of course, there are talented smart developers, no one doubts, but we are now talking about the President of the United States. And his behavior in politics. He behaves like an elephant in a china shop. Well, yes. And in this sense, I am not sure that the economy of the United States will stabilize by November of the 26th year. I generally believe that it will go to hell. I have no doubt of further deterioration in the living standards of ordinary Americans. Because Trump standing safely on the protection of the interests of billionaires, not ordinary people. He does not consider ordinary people to be people at all. For him, people start from $1 billion. And here he is very careful. Therefore, it is clear that these ordinary people will understand this sooner or later. And I hope that they will take him not only to the House of Representatives, but there will be an opportunity. Because of the Democrats' control over the Senate. And there will be a real possibility of impeachment of the current president of the third. And then we'll see how it is. This may be a difficult situation. And therefore, Trump, of course, in order to preserve power and freedom, I emphasize, and freedom. He needs to improve the American economy. But I'm not sure that he knows how, and most importantly, that he wants to improve it. Because he fervently believes that if he is to protect the interests of the privileged club techno-billionaires, many of whom hold frankly post-vasectomy views. Well, Elon Musk is a vivid example of such thinking, which immediately addresses us to the times of Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini. He is confident that in this case he will contribute to success. And I have not the slightest doubt that this is a group of people who will sooner or later also collapse. And its collapse will undermine a lot of technological achievements of our time. It professes exactly similar views of Europe of the 30s. Why Europe, by the way? You remember very well that in the 30s in the United States, non-Nazi fascist views enjoyed great sympathy. Of a large representative. The number of representatives of business and political establishment, Henry Ford is the man. Which will be an apologist for Nazism to Nazism. Well, he also had German roots there. A lot of explanations from Henry Ford, yes. Joseph Kennedy's sister. Yes, Disney. Disney loved it all, yes. Yes, in the UK, who persuaded Britain to surrender to Hitler. In much the same way that Trump is now persuading Ukraine to surrender to Putin. And Joseph Kennedy was older, as you know, dreamed that he would become President of the United States. He was a very real president for the position. By the way, this is the story of Trump and Trumpism. If not for the Second World War, would have happened in America then. After Roosevelt's second term, Joseph Kennedy had every opportunity to become President of the United States. Because a huge number of Americans held similar views and adheres to them now. But the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the further declaration of war by Germany on the United States. And the further course of the war, in fact, saved America from post-fascism, from real fascism. But did not save it from such a development of events now. Because you remember, Joseph Kennedy just left politics after that, and raised his children as political successors. The eldest son, Joseph, died in the war. Then the middle John became President of the United States. But when John and Joseph were young guys, they went to the German embassy. They talked with representatives of the Nazis. It all happened. They went to Germany. They admired it all. And it's clear that they then revised their views, but you just need to remember that it was all there. There was some kind of nightmare in general, and how this, so to speak, the hand of totalitarianism, was already approaching the bugle of America. And by and large, the fact that the United States, together with Great Britain and the Soviet Union, defeated Nazism in World War II. It became, of course, just a vaccination for 80 years, but the effect of the vaccination is over. And the Americans, by the way, still haven't figured out what happened. I recently watched the new film Nuremberg, dedicated to the Nuremberg trials. I know, it's an absolutely wonderful thing, because well, this is a new film that focuses on the personality of Hermann Göring. And it seemed to me that the authors of the film, as often happens in Hollywood, they generally identify the charming and likable Göring. Almost with Trump, he says, here is such a charming person, but he is actually a terrible person. To see. Absolutely. Absolutely terrifying. But Göring in general was not particularly charming, to be honest. He wasn't charming at all. Yes. But his brother's brother hated him with Nazism, his brother, as you know. Yes. But the bottom line is that you are on this film about the Nuremberg trials. There are no Soviet prosecutors at all, do you understand? Here is a member of this Nuremberg court, which sentenced Göring, Alterbrunner, Ribbentrop, and other Nazi bigwigs to death. After all, before that he sentenced to death, excuse me of course, Kamenev, Zinoviev, Evdokimov, Rodek, Rajudik, Dybenko, all the Bolshevik leaders. But in general, he was a well-known person. Furmanov still wrote about him. He became famous for the fact that he managed to sentence 120 people to death by telegraph. In other words, he did not see the accused at all, he simply telegraphed death sentences. Even the party control committee under the Central Committee of the CPSU could not get past this. He was reprimanded for this, for such actions were taken out under Stalin in the 40th year. Imagine, this is a man who was a murderer. He tried Gay Bruno and another murderer, Rudenko, who used his own gun. The prosecutor general should just say that this is the future prosecutor general. The future attorney general of the USSR, prosecutor then Soviet Ukraine, which is just from the Donbass, left a memory. He was the prosecutor of the Donetsk region in the 30s. There was something scary there in general. That's all we have in the Donbass. This is Roman Andreevich Rudenko. He was the prosecutor of the USSR at the German trial. And in the West, they still do not want to tell themselves that they're honest, principled, absolutely confident in their mission. Are American or British judges there? Really great people, they all have encyclopedias of honest jurisprudence. They tried Göring and Kleitbrunner alongside such executioners, who may even have surpassed many Nazi murderers. Well, I'm the people who staged mass executions. What's there to talk about? No Nazi judge sentenced anyone to death by telegraph. No. Now, but of course, then it was demonstrated all over the world that there is such an evil that is not condemned. That evil is not only not condemned, but it comes and judges other evil as if nothing had happened. After all, the Nuremberg trial is primarily a process of rehabilitation of Bolshevism. Here we refer very often. And there it is. And you know, there the Ukrainian insurgent army was recognized as such. They recognized it as such. What difference does it make what was decided at the Neumann trial when it was decided at the instigation of Stalin, who simply tried to use Truman and Attlee to deal with all his enemies? They did all this because they wanted to condemn Hitler's criminals. I understand them perfectly. But the payment for this was as a result of the fact that it's not even that fascism did not die. The fact is that evil itself turned out to be disobedient, and evil may not be punished. And evil can grow both in the form of communism and in the form of Nazism and change places. Do you understand? This is a lesson that all dictators of all times and people have learned. You just have to win. It doesn't matter what your views are, what crimes you have. You have to win, and you will sit next to the Americans and the British. They will not make a sound. You'll just have blood pouring from your hands, and they'll just say it's champagne. Here is the current moment that we see. Therefore, Trump is not allergic to Putin or Xi Jinping. We saw this fake with the Group of Five, which the State Department has already denied. Well, the idea that there will be a group whereas United States, China, India. United States, China, India. Japan has a fifth. Russia. The United States, China, India, Russia, Japan. Group of Five. I do not know how poor Japan got there. But they probably wanted to show that we are talking about a population of more than 100 million people, so they celebrate like this. But it's obvious. Of course, it may be fake, but this is clearly a group that Trump would like. Then you know what else is interesting. When we discuss all these fakes, the refutations of the State Department, do you even notice how this process, the so-called peaceful one, is going? It involves people who are not responsible for anything. Well, yes, social activists. Yes. In other words, When Rubio is negotiating, everything immediately takes on a different character because he understands that he will have to answer to Congress. Well, yes, and here Vitek and Vitek are two friends. Yes, but they're talking. Well, Vitkov is talking to Dmitriev. So what? You see, even Lavrov understood when the first meeting was held in the United Arab Emirates, yes, that there was no point in putting Dmitriev at the negotiating table, because he had to inform Rubio of the directives of the President of Russia. But it turned out that the directives have not changed since the 22nd year. And therefore, all this is absolutely pure irresponsibility. And all these proposals that Vitkov writes, they're under the dictation of Dmitriev or something else. These are just ordinary Russian wishes, which, by the way, we saw back in December of the 22nd year. Here is what the United States will legislatively agree, that NATO is not expanding further. And how in general can the United States decide for all of NATO? It's one ally. Well, yes, they can block the expansion of NATO, but here's a good question. And for how long? But will Trump cease to be president? The next president will also be blocked because Trump with Putin have agreed. Here I don't really understand the logic itself. So, we're on the air. We've been on the air for 32 minutes, and more than 18,000 people are watching us. About 5,500 put their likes to this broadcast. A big request is to distribute links to this broadcast and put likes on this broadcast, of course. Subscribe to our channels. Look, Vitaly, come on. Support the subscription request because it's important right now. It is important all the time because people underestimate and say, you are fools, you are engaged in self-promotion. You understand, this is the only way channels exist fully. They just don't exist any other way. Do you understand? In other words, it is directly dependent on your actions and the effect of what we do. And so, of course, I encourage everyone to do it. Even through force, when you don't want to and everyone is tired of everything. Well, no, I want you to subscribe because you want to, at least to my channel. Subscribe to my channel because you want to, and to Mark's channel because you don't want to. Whatever you say. Me, actually. Look, Vitaly Ivanovich, look, but there is another aspect concerning Europe itself. We have started a conversation about this, which Europe is already trying to demonstrate, but let's put it this way, consistency and obstinacy, while ignoring this principle of consensus and so on. As Ukraine has leaked to the press, it means that it insists that in the 27th year, at the very beginning, if the peace plan is adopted, it will be accepted into the EU. And, you know, I am in favor of Ukraine entering as soon as possible because I want to run. I told you. Ah yes, well, thank God At least, the sooner Ukraine becomes a member of the European Union, the more opportunities I will have to build a united Europe. The way I see it. But I don't really believe in, so to speak, political prospects because, well, in general, it is really possible to implement. There are several traps into which Zelensky has driven this whole story. That's how I do it. The first trap is that it says, oh, do you want a referendum? Please provide us with peace. Yes, that's all you said in the first question, answer. So this means, let Moscow stop the shelling, we will all hold elections for you to go. And suddenly someone, oh, and what about the elections? I won't take responsibility. Americans are not ready to take responsibility. It is necessary to persuade Moscow. Moscow, of course, has already refused. Then they don't understand. The second is that, well, yes, there can be a peace agreement. So you're telling us immediate membership. The 27th year is an immediate person in a little over a year. Immediate membership in the EU, but this is another thing that Moscow is already trapped in. Why? Because Moscow started playing with it. She says, well, this is an economic union, we don't mind. Membership at some point was so, well, unconvincingly said, depicted, let's say so, both by Lavrov and partly by Putin. So the comparison. Yes, we are, but we are against NATO, but not against it. I know for sure that they are totally against Ukraine's membership in the EU. And what do you know about the maiden of the 13th year because of this begins? Of course, because of this. Abandon the association. Why have they started saying now that it's not scary and Zelensky's kind of action, if he offers, it will knock it down? Because they are for sure. To no dick like this in the agreement will be registered, and all will sign off on it, jumping procedures. Membership in the European Union of Ukraine. After all, this is, in a sense, half a step towards the full integration of Ukraine into the Western area. Even if they can hope that the Europeans will not agree with this. And in this way, Europe's inability to make such a decision will be demonstrated once again. But note that the Europeans are going their own way. They managed to block, with Orban's help, negotiations on Ukraine's accession to the European Union. And the European Union was shown yesterday at a meeting in Lviv. In fact, he bypassed Orban's veto by starting the negotiation process itself. Yes. You see, in other words, the Europeans say, no, we really can do this. Of course, I do not know how to do this in the 27th year, but I will tell you honestly, there may be intensive negotiations. This, you see, I'm afraid that intensive negotiations may affect Ukraine's economic interests as a result. I am a supporter of the long-term negotiations on joining the European Union, where the country will be able to protect its economic interests. Our neighbors, the Poles, they defended the interests of their agriculture for many years. Until they became members of the European Union, were very tough-minded, postponed joining, and this is the right approach. But we, as they say, are not up to fat right now. If we manage to join in an accelerated way, then we can join. Although again, this may be a sectoral problem for a number of sectors of the economy. I'll tell you right away. Well, without an idea. And so the war is out. All in economics? Yes, you weigh it on the scales. These are all theses after the start of the war, and the war that has been going on for 4 years, about the fact that it's for us to standardize our economic and other parameters. Yes, as it is such agriculture will perish. Normal, so to speak. There may be a situation with the rejection of products on the EU market in particular. And so it will be. No, well, so it will be, so it will be. So what? Or this one here. I'm not saying anything, I'm just telling you what it looks like in general. Well, I'm really. I'm not saying I disagree with you. I agree with you, but I'm just sorry. Yeah. In other words, we state that Moscow pretends everywhere, and that it is not afraid if Ukraine is in the EU, and that, so to speak, it will be satisfied exclusively with the non-occupied part of the Donetsk region. And this is enough, and they are even ready to sacrifice a piece of Sums, Sumy region and Kharkiv. There, according to the amount and correct, I have 300 square kilometers, probably no more. Yes, because they are. And here, they require more than 6,000 square kilometers. And the fact that the war will stop, they will not resume after some time, it is clear there, depending on the economy. It's just that many people have illusions about this. You have seen some Russian experts, I won't mention their names, so that they don't start rushing us there to say, you are such and such, who are right foaming at the mouth, they get out right into the screen, so with all the chairs, and shout about the fact that you want to die further. You yourself have perished. Well, that is, it's like you probably told me to. I also have other thoughts, that poor Zelensky will now force him to sign all this, he will collapse poor. As if Zelensky can give up Donbass and the war. That's an idiotic idea. Tell us in order to expose them, so that we can develop all this for the audience. Listen, but then we have to agree that the purpose of this war was the territory of the Donetsk region. Well, that's ridiculous. The question arises, if the purpose of this war was the territory of the Donetsk region, what were the Russian troops doing in Kiev, Chernihiv, Zhytomyr, Sumy, Mykolaiv, Kharkiv? They wanted to go further, as you remember, they wanted to get out on the border of Ukraine with the self-proclaimed Transnistria. There is definitely Donbass. And when Putin in New Delhi says that Russia will definitely liberate both Donbass and Novorossiya, what's he talking about? Yes, he and we are both accomplished. All the goals of it's there. This is all absolutely clearly articulated. Therefore, I say again, I believe that all this is exclusively a method of destabilization. That is, pouring gasoline in different ways is an idea that may exist. I believe in her. Yeah. All right. We have another question regarding, well, thankless business until the new year, we called the ether means relatively. Well, the world for Christmas. What happens if nothing happens? That's what I mean. How? Mineral invitation. Forget about this plan. Just pauses, and he left, so to speak, to the ballroom and in general. Well, this plan failed, we will continue to work. We don't have a specific one made. He is not disappointed in Putin, he is disappointed in Zelensky, but he wants to stop the war. There will be new proposals, then Vitkov will send them somewhere again, or maybe new sanctions will lead against Russia. Maybe something will not give Ukraine. There's a lot more he can do. But they can forget about the plan, as if it never existed. I'm telling you, they don't remember the minerals agreement right now. Why should they have to stay? They will hold several rounds of negotiations, and see that Moscow is really not ready for anything in particular, and will calm down. So it can also be, well, because all the time, like Saspin, you know, this expectation of an increase in such a degree of the picture is expressed in the fact that, well, if not now, then that's it, then it's the end. Either the Kiev region will be occupied there, or it means the front will collapse, or it means Trump will get upset and stop giving intelligence and selling weapons to NATO, which in turn goes to Ukraine for Europe's money. People don't understand that it won't happen. All of his ultimatums and threats, a false choice. Because if there really was a choice, we should withdraw from the Donetsk region and the war stops. This is our payment for peace. This could be discussed, but the problem is that for Russia, it is not a payment for peace. Here's the thing. That's just a rhetorical device that allows you to continue to waste time. He explains that we have such a condition, for some reason Ukraine does not fulfill it. Well, all right, we will continue to fight. To the last Ukrainian, as Putin said recently, right? He already says these words. If they are ready to fight to the last Ukrainian, we are ready. If Europe wants to fight, we are ready. We're ready. And the most wonderful thing to me was when Lavrov told me how Russia simply had to liberate the poor population of the southeast from Bandera, who do not give the opportunity to speak their native language. This is very interesting to me. And when they turned into debris in Mariupol, bombing him, yes, with people. Or when they beat Kryvyi Rog every day, yes, they turn it into ruins there. Or when they turn Kharkov into ruins and Odessa. Today we are talking with you, now there is no light, no water, no heat in Odessa. Some kind of another Russian strike. What language do they speak in these cities? If they want to liberate the Russian-speaking population so much, why are they trying to starve and freeze people who still remember the Russian language? Makes them live in ruins if they are liberators. But it's weird. I always give a very good example, which I think is more adequate. Bulgarians think about the same way that there are no Macedonians. Yes. And the Russians believe that they do not exist Ukrainians. And the Bulgarians have a difficult relationship with Northern Macedonia, as you know, but I would like to be on the level. But they are not fighting, at least they are not fighting. But if you come to Sofia and say, listen, or maybe you will go to war and kill them all, so that they recognize themselves as Bulgarians. No. Bulgarians can slow down Macedonia's entry into the European Union. Bulgarians can issue passports to Macedonians as if they are Bulgarians. This is understandable. But it also doesn't happen to fight with people whom you consider your brothers. If you are like whom do you consider brothers? Do you forgive him for this political dislocation? You hope that you will come to an agreement with him sometime, but you do not shoot daggers, Iskanders and calibers at him. And not according to the army, mind you, where, by the way, the same people also serve, who should be freed. As not according to the army, but simply according to peaceful cities. Through the wonderful Russian Odessa. With calibers, daggers and bronze in Kharkov, which has always been a Russian city. In order to understand that Russia has never perceived these cities as Russian, that for them, they have always been foreign cities. Just look at the results of the war. Well, as a matter of fact, Chechnya has never been perceived as Russia, do you understand? Therefore, it was possible to wipe out thunderstorms in Grozny, because Chechens are not. I would say so. I would say that in Russia they do not believe that Chechens are not Russians. This is not an accurate definition. In Russia do not consider that the Chechens are people. Do you understand? That's what the cruel logic of the two Chechen wars was connected with. And this, too, must always be remembered when we talk about the health of Russian society and the Russian state. Well, yes. Well, we've been on the air for 45 minutes, so it's watching us. 21,200 viewers, and 7,000 have put their likes. We're going to take a break today. We're going to stick to our regulations. Of course, we haven't discussed a lot of things, but let's leave something for future broadcasts so as not to overload you. A huge request is still to distribute links in your accounts, social networks, groups. Also be sure to like it. This broadcast will help us get into the recommended ones, which means that we will increase the number of views of this wonderful broadcast. And of course, subscribe to the Feigen Life channel and to the Vitaly Portnikov channel in the description of this video. Named Vitaly Portnikov. You can find this link, subscribe, watch the broadcast there. Well, come to our channel. Literally tomorrow, we will have a broadcast with Alyona Kurbanova, do not miss it. Vitaly Danovich, thank you very much. See you soon. See you later. Yes, have a nice day.